What's up, you friggin' geniuses? Alright, so in this video, I'm going to teach you how to add and subtract mixed numbers with the same denominator. And just looking ahead real quick, in the next video, I'm going to do the same thing, but with different denominators. Okay, so I'm just going to split it into two videos because I think it'll be a little easier to follow the examples. Alright, so let's get into this. So, really quick to recap. What is a mixed number made of? So it's made up of two things. Okay? So first of all, it's made up of an integer. So what is an integer again? It's basically just a whole number, but it can be positive or negative. Okay, so like 1, 2, 10, or -1, -2, -100, whatever, right? So they're basically whole numbers, but they can be positive or negative. And then the other thing is just a proper fraction. Proper fraction. And again, what's a proper fraction? It's when the top number is smaller than the bottom number, okay? Or another way of saying that is when the numerator is less than the denominator. Okay, so those are the two things we're going to be looking for when we're solving these. So if I gave you 4 3/7 plus 1 2/7, how would we do that? All right, well, it's not too bad. We're going to group whole numbers together and fractions together. And then we're going to combine them at the end. So here we have a 4 and a 1, right? We have a 4 and a 1. And since we're adding, we're also going to add these together, okay? And here we have 3/7 and 2/7. Those are our fractions. 3/7, and we're adding 2/7. So what is this equal to? 5/7. And what's 4 plus 1? Well, that's just 5. All right, so the two things we're looking for is an integer and a proper fraction. Is this an integer? Yes. Is this a proper fraction? Yes. Okay, so that means we can combine these. How do you combine them? Just by adding them together. Okay, so 5 plus 5/7 is just 5 and 5/7. And that's your answer. All right, so not too bad, right? So let's do one other addition example. Now what if I gave you 2 4/5 plus 3 3/5? Okay, so remember, on one side we're going to group the whole numbers together, and on the other side we'll group the fractions together. So the wholes and the fractions. Okay, so on the left side I have a 2 plus a 3, right? 2 plus 3. And what is that? 5. And then on the right side I have 4/5 plus 3/5, right? So 4/5 plus 3/5. What is that? Well, that's equal to 7/5. Okay, so remember, two things we're looking for. Is this an integer? Yes. Is this a proper fraction? No. Right? This is an improper fraction because the top number is bigger than the bottom number. So how can we get a proper fraction out of this? Well, we're going to have to turn it into a mixed number, right? Because a mixed number has a proper fraction in it. So how do we turn improper fractions to mixed numbers? Well, we just have to divide them, right? Because fractions are just division problems. So 7/5, that's the same thing as saying 7 divided by 5, right? So let's do that. Okay, so we have 7 divided by 5. 5 goes into 7 once. 1 times 5 is 5. 7 minus 5 is 2, right? So we have a remainder of 2. Now, how do we regroup this to write a mixed fraction? Well, this top number, this is going to be our whole number, okay? This remainder is going to be our numerator. And then whatever number we had at the bottom of the fraction here is going to be at the bottom of our fraction here, okay? So this is equal to 1 2/5. Okay, so I'm going to rewrite this down here. 1 2/5. Okay, so 7/5, right, is equal to 1 2/5. So as you can see, now I have a whole number and a proper fraction. But remember, the whole numbers we have to throw on that side over there, right? So we had a 2, we had a 3, now we have a 1, okay? So now we have 2 plus 3 plus 1, right? What's that equal to? 6, okay? So since we threw it over to the left side, I'm going to get rid of it. Okay, and now all we're left with is 2/5 on the right side, okay? So now let's do our check. Do we have an integer here? Yes. Do we have a proper fraction here? Yes. So now we can combine them. So 6 plus 2/5, that's just equal to 6 2/5. Okay, so that's not too bad, right? So just remember, when we combine the fractions initially right here, when we're combining these fractions, if we get an improper fraction, all we have to do is turn it into a mixed number, okay? And then whatever proper fraction we get there, that's what we're going to throw in our answer down here. And then just remember to throw this whole number to the left side, right? And group it with the other whole numbers. So adding mixed numbers is pretty straightforward, I think, all right? So let's get into subtracting mixed fractions. Okay, so how would we do 4 3/7 minus 1 2/7? Okay, well, same thing. Whole numbers go on one side, fractions go on the other. So I'm going to have a 4 and a 1, but remember, this time we're subtracting, right? So this time we're subtracting, okay? So what's 4 minus 1? 3, okay? And then we're going to do 3/7, right? Minus 2/7, minus 2/7. What is that equal to? 1/7. Okay, so now let's check. Do we have an integer? Yes. Do we have a proper fraction? Yes. So now we can combine them. How do we combine them? By adding them together. I know we're subtracting in this problem, but whenever we pass our 2 checkmark test, right? Whenever we get our integer and our proper fraction, we're going to add whatever 2 things we have here. So we have a 3 here and we have 1/7 here, okay? So we're going to add them together. So what's 3 plus 1/7? That's 3 1/7. Okay, so again, just remember, this minus sign is specifically for when we're evaluating over here, okay? But at the very end, all we're going to do is add together our 2 answers. Okay, so let's do another example. Okay, so what if I had 2 3/5 minus 3 4/5? Okay, so on the left side, remember whole numbers, so I'm going to do 2 minus 3, right? So 2 minus 3, what does that equal to? -1. Okay, and then on the right side, I'm going to do 3/5 minus 4/5, right? 3/5 minus 4/5. What does that equal to? -1/5. Okay, so let's do our check. Do we have an integer here? Yes, 1 or -1. They're both integers, right? Do we have a proper fraction here? Yes, even though it's negative, it doesn't matter, right? The top number is smaller than the bottom number. Okay, so we have a proper fraction here. Okay, now let's combine these 2. How do we do that again? We're going to add them. Okay, so we have -1 plus -1/5, right? What does that equal to? Okay, so if you remember how to add negative numbers together, whenever you have a plus sign next to a negative sign, you get rid of the plus, right? So now all we have left is -1 minus 1/5. Right, so I'll rewrite it right here. -1 minus 1/5. Okay, and what is this equal to? Well, that's just -1 1/5. Right, because remember, if I had 1 plus 1/5, this would be 1 1/5, right? So just like I have a plus, I have a plus, so I have a plus. Here I have a minus, I have a minus, so I have a minus. So that's kind of the quick way of doing it. So this is our final answer, -1 1/5. And in case you need a quick review on how to add and subtract negative numbers, I'll link it up in the card. But otherwise, let's just get into the next example. So what if I gave you 2 4/5 minus 3 3/5? Okay. So again, we're going to do 2 minus 3, right? 2 minus 3 on this side. What's 2 minus 3? That's -1. And then we're going to do the fractions on the other side. So 4/5 minus 3/5. 4/5 minus 3/5. What does that equal to? +1/5. Okay? Do we have an integer here? Yes. Do we have a proper fraction here? Yes. So let's combine these. So -1 plus 1/5. Okay, so this one's different from the last example, right? Because in the last example, we had a minus, so our answer was a minus. But in this case, it's gonna be a little different, right? Okay, so there's 2 things we're gonna have to do to this number over here, -1. Okay, so first of all, we have to turn it into a fraction, because right now it's just a whole number, or it's just an integer. So how can we turn it into a fraction? Well, if you remember, you can always put a number over 1, right? Because this is the same thing as dividing by 1. And when you divide by 1, it doesn't change your number, right? So if I have 10 divided by 1, that's the same thing as 10. If I have 100 divided by 1, it's the same thing as 100. Okay, if I have -1 divided by 1, it's the same thing as -1. Okay, so we have -1 over 1, and then we have plus 1/5, right? Okay, but in order to add two fractions together, they have to have the same denominator, right? So how can we do that? Well, we can just cross the denominators, right? So this 1, we can multiply by 1, multiply by 1, right? And this 5, we can multiply by 5, multiply by 5. So let's rewrite our fractions now. So what's 5 times -1? Well, that's -5. What's 5 times 1? That's just 5, right? And then we're adding, so we're going to add. Then what's 1 times 1? That's 1. What's 5 times 1? That's 5. Now we have the same denominator, right? So we can keep it, and then we just do the top. What's -5 plus 1? That's -4. Okay, so -1 plus 1/5 is equal to -4/5. So that's our answer to that. All right, guys, so that's how you add and subtract mixed numbers that have the same denominator. So in the next video, I'm going to teach you how to do the same thing, but when fractions have different denominators, okay? And this very last example that we did right here, this is kind of your introduction to it, right? Because we had a different denominator here and a different one here. So I'm going to expand on that a little more in the next video. Please give the video a thumbs up if you found it helpful, and if you didn't, please leave me a question or comment down below telling me what you'd like to change, or if you got any questions or needed help with any problems, I'd be more than happy to clarify that for you and help you out with that, okay? So definitely practice this a little more. Good luck, and I'll see you in the next one.